there's a really good chance that right now, you, like me, are just feeling,
New questions continue to emerge today over the Justice Department's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files.
just too paralyzed, like, are the problems too big?
Very powerful men use their networks with each other to kind of hold on and help each other stay in control.
Like, what can I actually do? It's hopeless. What's heartbreaking and defeating is that you look at what politicians are doing and they always talk about change, but no change ever happens.
If you want to be in politics, you probably don't want to offend the billionaires. And that's why this thing has been hidden for decades. That's why Democrats and Republicans didn't expose this. Let's just be honest. It wasn't just a Trump thing. There were administration after administration that wanted to protect these people, and they're still protecting some of them.
But fortunately, there's a whole bunch of research to help change that specific feeling of powerlessness. There is a way out of this swamp, a way to quite simply change the world. Yeah, I mean, it's quite a way to start a YouTube video, isn't it? I mean, it's ambitious. I'll give myself that. But I did it, I said it, and I've left it in. Because where we're starting is with the feeling, the paralysis. Because I genuinely used to think that we were all f***ed and there was no hope. I had it on a t-shirt, I had the mug, and that one had a handle. But it was based on this research. In 1967, a psychologist called Martin Seligman ran one of the most famous experiments in the history of psychology. And brace yourself, because this was the 60s, where to be a scientist, all you needed was a white coat and no moral compass. So what Martin did is he put dogs in a box with a low partition in the middle that they could jump over. And on one side of the box, it delivered electric shocks through the floor, but the other side was safe. And dogs placed in the box quickly learned to jump over the partition to escape the shocks, straightforward. But then Seligman did something else. He took a different group of dogs, right? And he put them in a harness beforehand where they received electric shocks and they could not escape. No partition, no way out. They just had to endure it. And then those dogs were put in the box with the partition. But when the electric shocks came through the floor, those dogs didn't jump over the partition. They just took the shocks, even though escape was right there, literally a small jump away. They'd given up. They'd learned that nothing they did matters. And for 50 years, right, that study was just accepted science. And it is true. There is a truth to it. That helplessness is learned. You experience through uncontrollable bad things and your brain learns to stop trying. It became one of the most cited findings in all of psychology. It shaped how we understand depression, trauma, poverty, political apathy. But then, in 2016, Seligman and neuroscientist Stephen Maier published a landmark revision in the Psychological Review. So here's what the revised study actually showed. That passivity is not learned. It's the brain's default response to prolonged adverse stimulation. Because prolonged exposure to uncontrollable negative events activates, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong, so just accept it, the serotonergic neurons in the dorsal raphe nucleus, which is a brain region that inhibits escape behaviour. And it happens automatically. No learning required. It's just what your brain does automatically when it's overwhelmed. But, and this is key, the prefrontal cortex can inhibit the dorsal raphe nucleus, which means your thinking brain can turn off your giving up brain, which is the most useful sentence in neuroscience has ever produced, because your brain doesn't learn helplessness. Helplessness is wired in. It's the factory setting. It's where your brain starts. What has to be learned actively through direct experience is control. And interestingly, if you come from a position of privilege, you learn control very early in your life because you have agency. Whereas if you come from a position of not having much, of poverty, you don't have control in your life. So you do not learn that behavior. Because when an animal or a person experiences that their actions can actually change outcomes, it activates the medial prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex then inhibits the dorsal raphe nucleus. That Rafe nucleus. Is it dorsal? It can itself. It overrides the default passivity. So those dogs in 1967, they didn't learn to be helpless. Their brains defaulted to helpless because they'd never learned control. The dogs that jumped the partition, they'd previously learned through experience that their actions produced results. That learning is what gave them the ability to escape. Not instinct, not personality, learned control. The part that gives me hope, like genuine hope, is this. Barata, Seligman and Maier showed in 2023 that once the prefrontal cortex learns control, once you experience that your actions matter, it produces what they call long-term resilience. You don't just overcome helplessness in the moment, you become neurologically resistant to it in the future. So what does that mean for us? Well, it means that the feeling of nothing I do matters is not an observation about reality. It's your dorsal Rafe nucleus. F***ing dorsal Rafe nucleus. How many times do I have to tell you? It's a It's your dorsal Rafe nucleus doing what it evolved to do in response to overwhelming negative information. Your brain is defaulting to passivity because you've been exposed to a massive, seemingly uncontrollable system. So the antidote here isn't more information. It's not about information. It isn't understanding the system better. It isn't even another video. Awkward. The antidote is the experience of control. Not the belief that we have control, the experience of control, action, actual, tangible actions, where you see a behaviour produce an outcome. So how can we feel in control? Because in my last video, and you can see that here, there should be a link that comes up, about how your brain was literally built for a village of 150 people, that every empathy circuit, every moral instinct that's calibrated into your brain is for a group small enough where you can see everybody's faces. And that's why the Epstein economy feels unfightable, right? Because your brain measures the scale of the problem and just shuts down. Sit down, shut up. I've seen the scale of the problem and you are screwed, mate. It's trillions of dollars. You haven't got hope in hell of changing it. Just keep doom scrolling and know your place, okay? I'm built for a village. I've told you, I'm built for a village, 150 people. There's billions out there, right? Give up. That is a feeling, not the truth. That is a cognitive error in your brain because, amazingly, the same limitation that stops you feeling the scale of the problem also stops you feeling the scale of what you can do. Because your brain takes one action, one decision, one vote, one decision about where you spend your money, and it holds it up against 8 billion people or $200 billion, and it looks like nothing. But that's the brain, and that's the brain lying to you again. The same way 1 million deaths become a statistic. The compounding effect of your actions becomes invisible. You cannot feel exponential effects. Like a conversation that changes one person's mind, who changes 3 others, who changes 3 more. Your brain can't simulate, just can't figure it out. It flatlines, it returns negligible. It's not gonna have any effect. Shut up, stop having conversations. But negligible is not what the science shows. Negligible is not what history shows, because the hopelessness that you feel isn't data. That feeling is a glitch. Let me explain. Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler tracked over 50,000 relationships over 5,124 people in the Framingham Heart Study. It's one of the longest running health studies in history. They found that behaviours and emotions cascade through social networks to 3 degrees of separation. For example, if you start cooperating, like genuinely cooperating in person with people you know, the person who receives that cooperation is more likely to cooperate with someone else. And that person cooperates with someone they know. Your act of showing up multiplies 3 times before it fades. 3 degrees of separation. Your behaviour ripples outwards to people that you will have never met and will never meet. You can't reach 3 million people, but you don't have to. 150 people, each connected to 150 people, each connected to 150 more is 3.375 million people that you can affect. The network does the rest. And here's the compounding fact that you don't need everyone. You don't even need to contact everyone. You just need 25% because, and this fact is even more compelling, it doesn't even take most people to create change. In 2018, Centola at the University of Pennsylvania published a study in Science. And they set up groups and paid them to agree on a social norm, like something like whether they agree with gay marriage, or something blander like what name to give a face in a photo.
So I partnered with a physicist, Andrea Baron-Kelly, and he and I decided to build an online social network experiment in which we recruited hundreds of people and put them into online social networks with strangers and basically allowed them to collectively produce a social norm. Then we let people just interact randomly with other people. And at the beginning of this process, no one could achieve any coordination. In fact, there was dramatic failure across the networks. And it looked like this wasn't going to work at all. But then suddenly there was a radical shift in the dynamics. And the population spontaneously went from a completely disorganized state in which no one could agree with anyone to everyone using the same global convention. So what we're working on now is whether or not groups can control this process of norm formation. And so we think of this in terms of committed minorities. If there was a large population that had already agreed on the social norm, how small would that minority need to be in order to overturn the norm and change the population's attitudes to a new dominant belief?
So once a whole group had agreed, he introduced small groups of committed dissenters who pushed for a different norm. When fewer than 25% of the group pushed for change, nothing happened. The status quo held. But the moment a committed minority hit 25%, the entire group flipped rapidly. The new norm took over. In fact, one trial, the difference between complete failure and total success was a single person. And then there's this razzle-dazzle fact that I absolutely love. Centola doubled and then tripled the financial incentive for people to stick with the old norm, and it didn't matter. 25% still tipped it. Money didn't work. In his own words, when a community is close to a tipping point to cause large-scale social change, there is no way the community would know this. Just below it, their efforts fail. Just above it, rapid success.
What's interesting about it is that even though the contagion dynamics spread in this sort of complex way, which seems like it should be slower, it spread to like 2.7 million people in a week, right? So these dynamics can be really quite fast if they take hold of the network in the right way.
The way that tipping points occur is that a critical mass grows in the periphery of the network. People coordinate with each other and they spread through strong ties and wide bridges, reinforcement for a new idea. This process of coordination can't be overstated. It is the fundamental aspect of all social change processes. It's also how marriage equality wound up spreading from marginal communities across the U.S. to change social norms so that the vast majority of Americans now support marriage equality. Every single social change process we know of, they exhibit this classic S-shaped growth curve, where initially there's slow growth early on, then you hit the tipping point, there's rapid acceleration, and then finally a slowdown at the end.
So when going to a meeting feels small, when posting that video feels stupid, and it often does, when joining that union feels insignificant, when showing up feels pointless against the scale of what we're looking at, the problems systemically which are out there, consider the very real possibility that you actually might be the person who tips it. Because you'll never know. You will never know. And that's the point. The person who tips a tipping point never knows they did it. And that's surely the most frustrating and the most liberating fact in this entire video, right? You don't get the credit. Wait, I don't get the credit. I just have to keep showing up into the void and hope it works. Yeah, because that's the maths. Just trust the maths. In the same way you do when you get into your car, in the same way you do when you get on a plane, trust the maths. Because everything that works in our society is maths. When you look at a kettle, it's maths that created that. Maths applied to engineering. And the maths says, if you go out there and have an effect, that effect compounds. It can change the world. And I know this sounds like the psychology of like one small person can change the world. And I feel like a plonker even saying it. But, one small person can change the world. It's not a slogan. It's peer-reviewed neuroscience and experimental sociology published in Science, PNAS, and the Psychological Review. The studies aren't telling you to believe you can make a difference. They're showing you mechanistically how small-scale action creates large-scale change. Fact. And they're also showing you something that the motivational poster never mentions, that feeling of smallness, the sense that nothing you can do possibly matters against a system this size. That feeling itself is a byproduct of cognitive biases that have been documented and named: psychic numbing, scope insensitivity, the helplessness default. The system we're up against is so big it absolutely makes you feel helpless. But the antidote, the actions you can take, feel so pathetically small, it makes you feel like a self-help wanker. Because I know how this sounds, right? I'm a comedian sitting in front of you, citing peer-reviewed neuroscience, telling you that showing up matters and community is the antidote. Like, I'm one PowerPoint presentation away from a TEDx talk, right? You can absolutely call me a self-help wanker, but it won't change what Seligman published in the Psychological Review, and it won't change what Centola published in Science. You're gonna have to take it up with them, and good luck. They're very busy shocking dogs. Hi, you've got to the answer phone of Martin Seligman. I can't come to the phone right now because I'm too busy kicking dogs in the bollocks. But if you leave your name and number, I'll get back to you shortly. That was the door. The system is enormous and it makes you feel helpless. The antidote is embarrassingly small and it makes you feel like an absolute plonker. But that gap between the scale of the problem and the scale of the solution is actually much smaller than you think, but is exactly why it's hard to see change happening. So here's how you actually override it. 2 neurological hacks. Hack 1, do something. Do something where you see the result. Your prefrontal cortex learns control through experience, not information. That's the whole point of the Seligman revision. The dogs that could escape were the ones that had previously experienced their actions producing results. For example, I love this research taken after Hurricane Katrina. Researchers found that positive active coping was strongly protective against PTSD symptoms. People who actively rebuilt their communities, who had tangible tasks, who could see their actions producing outcomes, fared significantly better psychologically than those who remained passives, even controlling for the severity of what they'd experienced. So walk, build, write the letter, go to the meeting. The specific action matters less than the experience of agency. Your brain needs to see what you did change something. Every time it does, it rewires against helplessness, which is why the doom scroll is so harmful, because you see no change there. And it is absolutely about changing you first, and that change radiates outward. Hack 2, break the scroll. Oxytocin isn't just released through physical touch. It's released through cooperation, through trust, through working together towards a shared goal. So, join a union is not a political slogan. It's a neurochemical prescription. Physical community connection triggers oxytocin, which suppresses cortisol, which restores your prefrontal cortex, the exact brain region that overrides the helplessness default. Because insanely, community isn't just a nice to have, it's the neurological antidote to the Epstein economy. And that means that passive scrolling is the enemy, right? Not just because it's bad for your mood, which it is, but because it gives you dopamine without giving your prefrontal cortex any experience of control. It's outrage without agency. It's the release valve that stops you doing the thing that would actually change your brain, your life, your society. And I know I make content for social media. I am aware of the irony. I'm literally using the thing I'm telling you damages your prefrontal cortex to tell you it damages your prefrontal cortex. Like, I'm not saying delete anything. I'm just saying there's a distinct difference between using social media to organize and using it to consume. One activates your prefrontal cortex, the other numbs it. Proven, factually. The neuroscience says that the way out of this maze is connection, action, and community. Not digital, physical, not abstract, tangible, not alone, together. And all of this psychology is really real for me, really practically real in my own life, because I had to learn about learned helplessness and the paralysis in order to get myself out of the hole, in order to get myself out of homelessness. I was homeless, I was bankrupt. And I mean, the fact that I managed to build this club is absolutely unlikely from where I was 15 years ago. This stuff isn't abstract for me. And what I'm about to say is really, I suppose, going to sound like an ad, and I don't and I kind of need to own that up front, it's not. But it is an advertisement, I suppose, for a type of behaviour. And it's also, from my perspective, the most honest example that I have what this looks like, what I'm talking about today looks like in practice. Like, some of you might know that I run a venue called the Bill Murray, which is home of Angel Comedy, a club that I started in a pub in Angel, Islington in 2010 with somebody called Linus Lee, Katerina Vrana and Sarah Pierce. And it started out as a free community-funded comedy club, and as of 2026, it pays 50 plus comedians a week. And it was crowdfunded into its own venue by people who believed in the model. The Christakis ripple. That's the Centola tipping point, a free comedy night above a pub that enough people showed up to that eventually became something that's a solid structure that employs dozens of people a week. It's not a corporation, it's the opposite. It's a room that exists because a community decided it should. So from May, I'm going to try an experiment. I'm going to be posting videos from the club. Like, not polished, not scripted, just showing and sharing community, which is what the science shows is the opposite of the Epstein economy. It's what community economics looks like in practice. I won't put them on this YouTube, I'll put them on my Patreon for free. But you can also donate on the Patreon if you have the money to. But overall, everything that I'm talking about, what I'm doing, essentially, stop looking at the machine and start breaking it. And that's not by feeling outraged, that's not by doom scrolling the next set of names. It's by doing something real, actually real, something physical, something collective, something that feels embarrassingly, pathetically small compared to the scale of the problem. Because what the science has clearly shown is that your brain is wired for helplessness, but it can learn control. And once it does, it doesn't unlearn it. Your body is currently flooded with cortisol, but community produces oxytocin, and oxytocin wins. Your prefrontal cortex is suppressed, but action restores it. Building something restores it. Showing up restores it. In fact, even just walking, going out and having a walk, restores it. You don't need to convince everyone, you just need to convince 25%. You don't need to reach millions. Your influence ripples to 3 degrees, whether you see it or not. You don't need to comprehend to understand the scale of the problem. You only need to reach the people you can see. That's it. You cannot see your own network, you never will, but it's there. And the science says it's bigger than you think, and it's more real than you feel. The Epstein economy is counting on you feeling too small, too alone, and too overwhelmed to do anything. Prove it wrong.